A lot of survivors were not ignoring abuse. They were trying to make sense of something designed to confuse them. Read that again. Because if you ever felt like you should have known, this is where that belief starts to break. Narcissistic abuse doesn't always enter your life as danger. It enters as connection. And that changes everything. It rarely starts with harm. It starts with intensity, chemistry, attention, emotional closeness that feels rare. Like you were finally chosen, finally seen. It feels meaningful, almost faded. And that's exactly why so many people stay longer than they understand. Because abuse is not just what hurts you. It's what confuses you while you're being hurt. And when the same person who destabilizes you is also the one who comforts you, your mind doesn't label it as danger. It labels it as attachment. That is not weakness. That is how trauma is built. Narcissistic abuse rarely moves in a straight line. It moves in contradiction. And contradiction is where the mind starts to lose clarity. One version of them feels loving. Another version feels cruel. One moment feels safe. The next feels like emotional collapse. And your brain is forced to hold both realities at the same time. That split is not survivable in a clean emotional way. So the mind does what it always does under confusion. It starts searching for meaning. What version is real? What did I do wrong? How do I get back to the good version? Read that again. Because that search is exactly what keeps people stuck. Not because they didn't see the harm, but because the harm never stayed consistent enough to be named clearly. When someone is cruel all the time, the mind eventually accepts it. But when they are affectionate and harmful, present and deceptive, apologetic and repeating the same behavior, warm and then punishing without warning, your nervous system doesn't settle into clarity. It settles into monitoring, watching, analyzing, trying to prevent the next shift. And this is where it becomes psychological conditioning. Because confusion doesn't push you away. Confusion pulls you deeper in. It makes you think the answer is just one conversation away. One explanation away. One moment of clarity away. But the clarity never stabilizes because the pattern itself depends on instability. And slowly, something else begins to happen. You stop asking, why are they doing this? And you start asking, what is wrong with me that I can't handle this? That shift is where the damage deepens. Because now the relationship is no longer just happening to you. It is happening inside your self-perception. You're not remembering this wrong. You were trained not to trust your memory. Not all at once. Not clearly. But gradually. Through phrases like, "You're too sensitive. That didn't happen like that. You're overreacting. You always twist things. You're the problem here." Each one sounds small alone. But together, they don't just create conflict. They create internal doubt. And once doubt enters your own perception, reality starts to feel negotiable. That is why so many survivors later say, "I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't fully trust myself." Exactly. That is the trap. Not blindness. Not stupidity. Not ignorance. But erosion. A slow weakening of trust in your own mind while you are still inside the experience. And when you combine that with attachment, hope, intermittent affection, apologies that reset everything temporarily. The mind stays suspended between truth and denial for a very long time. Not because it wants to, but because it was never given consistency to stand on. And then there is the other layer. Most survivors weren't just attached to the person. They were attached to the possibility. The version of the relationship that existed only in moments. The future that was always promised but never stabilized. The idea that if they just tried harder, it would finally change. That hope is powerful because it delays grief. And as long as hope is active, the truth stays postponed. Until one day, it isn't. And when clarity finally arrives, it doesn't just name the abuse. It names the time lost trying to fix something that was never built to hold together. That realization doesn't just hurt. It reorganizes everything. Because once you see the pattern clearly, the confusion can't lead you anymore. And that is when the system finally breaks. Not the relationship, but the illusion that kept you inside it.